homeless boy asked a billionaire, "Can I sleep here tonight?" The billionaire's response shocked everyone. It was nearly midnight on a freezing January night in downtown Chicago. The streets were half empty, lit only by the orange glow of flickering street lamps and the cold blue of headlights sweeping past. The sidewalks shimmered with patches of black ice, and the wind pushed trash into corners like it was trying to hide the city's forgotten pieces. At the marble steps of a towering hotel, glass, gold, and steel rising 30 stories into the sky, a boy no older than 10 stood still. His sneakers were worn thin. Tear ran through the elbow of his hoodie, but his eyes didn't ask for pity. They searched for something more. Inside the lobby, behind a thick pane of spotless glass, the billionaire sat, James Halden, founder of Halden Tech. Gray suit, silver watch, unreadable expression. He was the kind of man who could move markets with a shrug. Then came the voice, soft, steady, and clear. "Sir, can I sleep here tonight?" The boy stood with his hands in his pockets, chin lifted, eyes locked on James. And for a second, time held its breath. Everyone expected the billionaire to keep walking, to wave for security, to say nothing at all. But instead, James stood up, and what happened next would leave the city, and eventually the nation, speechless. Before we dive into the story, a quick like and subscribe helps us keep telling stories like this one. Stay with us. This story might just change how you see the world. James Halden didn't speak right away. He looked down at the boy, the cold breath between them curling in the air like questions with no answers. Behind James, the revolving door hissed, and the warmth of the hotel lobby spilled onto the sidewalk, inviting but only for those who belonged. Then came the voice that snapped the moment in half. "Mr. Halden," barked a sharply dressed man stepping through the door. "Let's not be late." It was Victor Price, James's personal advisor of 15 years. Always 3 steps behind, always speaking 2 steps too soon. The kind of man who measured people in profit margins. He glanced at the boy like he was a coffee stain on a cashmere suit. "Security should have cleared the entrance. You shouldn't be talking to—" Victor stopped himself, eyes flicking back to the child. "Loiterers." James didn't answer. He kept looking at the boy. The wind picked up again, cutting between buildings like a blade. The boy stood still. "Please, sir, I don't want money. Just a warm place to sleep. Just tonight." James saw it then. Not just the cold in the kid's cheeks or the tremble in his hands, but something deeper, familiar. He remembered that feeling. Not from a movie. Not from some book about grit or bootstraps. No, from real life. From a gas station bathroom in St. Louis when he was 17. Sleeping upright on the toilet seat so he wouldn't be seen under the door. Backpack under his knees, shoes soaked through from rain, and a notebook in his lap filled with schematics drawn in pencil. He hadn't had a roof over his head for 7 months. No family. Just the idea of something better someday. And he re-stood that idea again, smaller, thinner, colder. "James," Victor pressed, now standing shoulder to shoulder with him. "We're expected upstairs. In 10 minutes. Media. Executives. This isn't the time for charity." James turned toward Victor. "It's always the time for humanity," he said quietly. Victor gave a tight smile. "Let's be realistic. Let's call someone who handles this. You're not going to let a homeless kid into the Pendle." The boy heard that. His shoulders pulled in like he was trying to shrink himself out of the way. James sighed through his nose. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a key card. "Come with me," he said to the boy. Victor laughed. "You're serious?" James didn't answer. He just held out his hand. The boy hesitated, looked at it, then took it. The lobby grew quiet as they stepped inside. The concierge froze. A bellhop whispered. Someone with a clipboard stared like she'd seen a ghost. James didn't blink. They walked through the marble-floored lobby, the boy's ragged sneakers squeaking softly with each step, past designer suits and floor-length coats, past disbelief and side eyes. Victor followed like a storm cloud. You can't be serious. We have PR to think about. Liability. If anything happens. James stopped walking and turned to face him. Then it's on me. Victor opened his mouth, then closed it. James tapped the elevator button. The boy's eyes widened as the polished doors opened with a chime. Have you eaten? James asked. No, sir. Room service will fix that. Inside the elevator, James stood tall in the corner. The boy stood next to him, hands clasped in front of his chest like he didn't know what to do with the warmth suddenly blooming around him. For a moment, the silence was comfortable. Then the boy spoke, voice small but clear. My name's Caleb. James smiled. Nice to meet you, Caleb. As the elevator rose, so did the tension. Victor was pacing behind the scenes. Phone out. Damage control in motion. Emails sent. Calls made. This wasn't part of the plan. Not for the billionaire, not for the brand. But James was no longer thinking about plans. He was thinking about that gas station in St. Louis. About the time he got jumped for his backpack and had to start from scratch. About the janitor named Dennis who handed him a peanut butter sandwich and said, not all help comes with a cost. And how that moment had changed everything. Room 4101, James said, unlocking the door with a quiet beep. The suite opened like something from a dream. Cream-colored couches, floor to ceiling, windows showing the city like a lit-up map of possibility. A fireplace danced behind glass. Caleb stood frozen, mouth slightly open. James knelt next to him, not lowering himself out of pity, but to speak eye to eye. Take a shower, order food, get some rest. Caleb swallowed hard, emotions wrestling behind his eyes. You're not going to change your mind? No, James said. No one's kicking you out tonight. Caleb nodded. And James could see it now, how long it had been since someone kept a promise to this kid. James stood to leave, but Caleb caught his sleeve. Why are you doing this? James looked at him for a long moment, then simply said, because someone once did it for me. The door closed softly behind him. In the hallway, James exhaled. Deeply, slowly. Downstairs, the night was still cold. The wind still bit. The city still turned, indifferent and fast. But in one corner of it, a little warmth held steady. And it wasn't coming from the fireplace. The next morning, the sun stretched across the Chicago skyline, throwing pale gold light onto the rooftops. The city was beginning to stir. Commuters, horns, paper cups of coffee clutched in. Gloved hands. Inside the Pendle Hotel, everything was as polished and precise as ever. The scent of fresh citrus cleaner clung to the floors, and soft jazz drifted through the lobby like background. Dialogue in a movie that hadn't hit its twist yet. In the conference room on the 28th floor, a panel of executives sat waiting. Sleek suits, tablet, screens, and quiet murmurs. At the head of the table was Victor Price. Hands folded, voice calm, but eyes flicking to the door every 20 seconds. James Halden was late. That never happened. At precisely 8:19 a.m., the glass doors opened. James stepped in. But he wasn't alone. Walking beside him, wearing a Pendle Hotel robe 3 sizes too big and a pair of plush slippers, was Caleb. Whispers broke out across the room like scattered rain. Victor stood. James, what is? James raised a hand, gently but with authority. The room quieted. He pulled out a chair at the far end of the conference table and motioned for Caleb to sit. The boy did, shy but composed. He didn't look scared, just curious, watching everything. James took his place at the head of the table. He looked calm, settled, unshakable. I know some of you have questions, he said. A few nodded. One man chuckled under his breath. This is Caleb, James continued. He spent last night in a warm bed, with a hot meal and a roof over his head for the first time in weeks. Maybe longer. He looked at the executives one by one. This isn't a PR stunt. This isn't a distraction. This is the point. Victor leaned forward. James, with all respect, this meeting is about the Halden Initiative. We're presenting to national investors in 4 hours. This situation, Sends the wrong message. James nodded slowly. You're right. It does send a message. But not the wrong one. He stood, walked to the window, and gestured toward the sprawling city below. Out there, right now, there are over 600,000 homeless individuals in this country. Nearly 40% are under the age of 18. That's a stadium full of kids. Every single night, sleeping on concrete. A hush fell over the room. Some shifted in their seats. Others lowered their eyes. I've spent years designing systems to make life more efficient. Smarter homes, smarter cities. But somehow we've let our smartest cities fail the simplest test of decency. Shelter. He turned, facing them fully now. That ends today. Victor narrowed his eyes. What are you saying? I'm repurposing the Halden Initiative, James said. We're pivoting. All funding, all engineering, all infrastructure planning is going to build transitional housing. Real solutions. Modular, fast deploy shelters, job pathways, health access. Pilot programs start here in Chicago by winter. The room exploded. You're joking. You're risking the whole portfolio. This could cost billions. James let the noise rise for a beat. Then he calmly raised his voice, not shouting, but cutting through the room with precision. I was homeless. Silence. I built my first prototype in a library stairwell. Slept in a supply closet for 6 weeks. I ate out of vending machines, stole power from wall sockets, showered at the YMCA. And you know what kept me alive? He looked down the table at Caleb. Someone who didn't walk past me. No one spoke. Caleb is not a statistic. He's not a liability. He's a reminder of how close we all are to being forgotten. Victor stared at him, lips pressed thin. So you're abandoning the board-approved plan? No, James said. I'm honoring the real mission. Innovation isn't about profit. It's about people. He walked back to his seat, sat down beside Caleb, looked around the room one last time. You asked what message this sends, he said quietly. It says this company answers when someone knocks. The room stayed still, for the first time truly listening. And then, unexpectedly, someone clapped. A single clap, then two, then a few more. It wasn't thunderous, but it was real. Caleb looked up at James with something new in his eyes. Not awe, not dependence, possibility. The boy didn't say anything. He didn't need to. In that moment, he understood something that most people never get the chance to learn. Power isn't what you hold. It's what you give away. And James Halden, once a kid with nothing, had just given him a future. The room remained still after James Halden's words. No one looked at their tablets. No one refreshed their email. The kind of silence that didn't ask for more, because there was nothing more to say. For a moment, the city outside the window seemed quieter too. Cars still moved, horns still honked. But inside that glass-paneled conference room, time had settled into something more human. Victor Price sat back in his chair, staring down at the gloss of the conference table. His fingers tapped once, then stopped. He wasn't a man easily moved. He'd been at James's side for over a decade through IPOs, buyouts, tech crashes, and internal wars. He'd seen James at his coldest, his sharpest, but he'd never seen this version. Finally, Victor looked up. I didn't know, he said, voice low, deliberate, about where you came from. James gave a small nod. I never talked about it. You could have, Victor said, quieter still. I would have listened. There was no apology. Not directly. But something in the way Victor's voice broke slightly at the end was more honest than any rehearsed sorry. James didn't press, didn't gloat. He just met Victor's eyes, steady and calm. We all carry stories we don't tell, James said gently. But they still shape the way we walk into rooms. Victor gave the smallest of nods. Then, without being asked, he closed his laptop. The gesture didn't seem dramatic, but everyone noticed it. It was a surrender of sorts, a quiet acknowledgement that the conversation had shifted from business to something bigger. Across the table, Linda Zhao, the company's chief engineer, leaned forward. I joined Halden Tech because I wanted to work on something that mattered, she said. I always thought innovation meant speed, scale, making the world run smoother. But maybe it means slowing down, looking closer. She glanced at Caleb, who was now sitting up straighter, eyes focused on her like he was part of the conversation, not just a guest in it. What can I do to help? She asked. James turned toward her. Start sketching. We'll need heat-efficient shelter pods that can fold and deploy within an hour. Simple materials. Nothing proprietary. I'm on it, she said, already pulling out a pen and notebook. Next came a younger man, Tyree Jenkins, head of community partnerships. He'd been quiet for most of the meeting, listening with an intensity that hadn't gone unnoticed. I've got relationships with local nonprofits, he said. People on the ground who already know the neighborhoods where help's needed most. We can build with them, not around them. James nodded. Let's bring them to the table. Tyree smiled. Not the slick kind executives practiced, but the kind you saw after someone finally got permission to say what they meant. Even the PR lead, whose entire body had stiffened when Caleb first entered the room, slowly raised her hand. What if, she said carefully, instead of spinning this, we just show it? James looked at her. No campaign, no slogan, just let the story tell itself. She paused, surprised at her own suggestion. Exactly. James gave a quiet smile. Then let's make sure it's worth telling. Across the room, the tone had shifted completely. No one spoke in metrics now. No one led with fear. These weren't executives anymore. They were people, designers, engineers, builders. And for the first time in a long time, they weren't building for shareholders. They were building for someone real. And that someone was sitting quietly in a white hotel robe, listening to adults talk about dignity, like it was something worth designing from scratch. Caleb hadn't spoken in a while, but his eyes had changed. Less guarded, less tired, not wide. With hope, he wasn't naive but alert, present. He turned to James. Do you think I could help? The room stilled again, not with tension, but with a kind of reverence. James smiled. You already are. A soft knock came at the glass door. A staff member from the hotel entered with a tray: pancakes, eggs, orange juice. Caleb's breakfast. James took it from the man and set it in front of the boy like a father might. No fanfare, just a quiet understanding. Eat, he said. We've got work to do later. Caleb picked up his fork. It was the first warm meal in days, maybe longer. No one looked away, and no one pitied him. They simply watched, like they were witnessing something sacred, a boy becoming visible again. As Caleb ate, James turned back to the team. We're not saving anyone, he said. Let's be clear. We're just giving people the tools to stand. That was the last thing he said that morning. There were no speeches, no corporate catchphrases, just motion, people talking, sketching, planning. Some stood. Some pulled chairs closer together. The room transformed into something new. Not a boardroom, a beginning. And out in the hallway, the boy's empty slippers sat beside the door, because for the first time in a long time, Caleb wasn't going anywhere. 6 months later, the snow had melted. The Chicago sky had turned soft and gray, and on the west side of the city, past the glittering skyline, past the noise and glass towers, a different kind of building had begun to rise. It wasn't tall. It wasn't flashy. But it was alive. Rows of small, modular homes stretched across what had once been a cracked, forgotten lot. Near Roosevelt Road, each unit had a solar panel on the roof, insulated walls, a locking door, clean linens folded at the foot of every bed, a welcome card on every table. At the center of the lot, a sign made of polished wood read, "The Halden Grounds." A place to begin again. The idea had started in that conference room. But what followed had come from far more than blueprints. It came from listening. It came from letting people speak who had once been ignored. And one of those people stood now in front of a half circle of kids, clipboard in hand, warm, jacket zipped to his chin. Caleb, 12 years old, a little taller now, posture stronger. His sneakers were clean. His voice was steady. He pointed to the corner of the new resource center. That's where we'll stock the library. You can borrow whatever you want, no due dates. Just bring it back when you're ready. The younger kids nodded, eyes wide. And this? Caleb said, stepping onto a small platform made of reused pallet wood. This is where we'll have town talks. Every Friday. Anyone can speak. Doesn't matter if you're new, or scared, or quiet. If you've got something to say, we listen. Behind him, the mural on the center wall showed a city skyline with bridges growing like trees. At the bottom of it, a single painted hand reached down toward another, smaller, unsure, but reaching back. It had been Caleb's idea. He wasn't just living here, he was helping lead it. James Halden visited most weekends. Not to give speeches, not to shake hands for cameras. He came in a faded coat and a coffee thermos, walking the grounds quietly, asking what people needed, fixing things with his hands, listening more than talking. On this particular morning, he stood at the edge of the lot, watching as Caleb guided a few kids through setting up planter boxes for the spring. He wasn't directing, just encouraging, letting them figure things out, giving space. Good instincts, said Victor Price, stepping up beside James. He'd traded in his tailored suits for rolled sleeves and canvas boots, clipboard under his arm, tablet in hand. He's a natural, James said. Victor glanced over. You were right, you know? James didn't look away. About what? Victor nodded toward Caleb. The best leaders aren't the ones who push to the front. They're the ones who remember what it feels like to be left out. A quiet beat passed between them. They listen longer, Victor added. They watched as one of the planter boxes tipped sideways and spilled dirt across the gravel. Caleb crouched without frustration, helped the younger boy lift it again. No scolding, just care. Repetition. A second try. In the distance, Linda Zhao's team was working on a new solar-powered water system. Tyree was running a small employment hub out of a retrofitted trailer. There was a garden now, a bakery stand, a kid-run bike repair shop. Everything ran on shared respect and earned trust. It was small, still growing, but real. And every Friday, when the sun dipped below the skyline, the community gathered on the palletwood platform for the town talk. That night, Caleb stepped up again, holding a folded piece of paper. He didn't unfold it. I was invisible once, he said softly. The crowd didn't shift. They listened, quiet still. I used to sleep on benches, or buses when I could sneak on, and I thought maybe I was broken, that maybe I wasn't supposed to be seen. He looked around the circle of faces. But someone saw me, and he didn't just hand me a blanket. He gave me a key to a door, a key to a different life. He smiled gently. And now we have more keys to give. He stepped down. A small girl hugged him around the waist. Someone clapped. Then another. Not loud. Not explosive. Just enough to make the moment settle like sunlight over water. From the back of the group, James watched. Not as the billionaire. Not as the founder. But as a man who'd once needed help too, and who had chosen to be the help when his time came. The wind passed through the lot, lifting the corner of the mural slightly where it met the wall. The two painted hands reaching for each other. One no longer reaching alone. This was not a shelter. It was a beginning. And no one here was invisible anymore. Have you ever looked at someone on the street and wondered, what's their story? Caleb was just a boy, asking for warmth on a cold night. James stopped. He listened. And that one yes changed everything. It didn't take a miracle, just presence. Maybe you've been Caleb. Maybe, without knowing it, you're James. If the story moved you, drop a comment. Share your moment. Subscribe if you believe kindness still matters. Because kindness isn't rare. It's just waiting for someone like you to pass it on.